just chomping at the bit to make a contribution.
Mr. Chair.
I call Kanwaljit Singh Bakshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to acknowledge the previous speaker, Honourable Jackie Dean, for taking 3 clauses which I was going to take, but she has already addressed, so I'll take some other clause. And I would also like to acknowledge the Minister for letting us know that SOP has been withdrawn, otherwise I would have spoken on that. Mr. Chair, I would like to touch upon Part 19, which is Justice of Peace Act 1957. And Clause 57 provides that Part 19 amends the Justice of Peace Act 1957. Mr. Chair, it has been a coincidence that I had a constituent who came to my office regarding this issue. He retired and wanted that retired title of his JP because he was no more able to provide the service. And by chance, this bill was in the House, and I discussed with him that there will be an amendment very soon in the Statutes Amendment Bill number 2, which will give you that opportunity to have retired written with him as a JP. The reason was that he had an accident, and due to that, he is suffering from dementia, and he could not remember the things happened in the present. And that's why he wanted to retire, but there was no provision. But I'm very pleased that this bill is addressing that issue, and somebody who has served less than 10 years can write as a retired JP because of this provision being ratified. The second part which I would like to touch upon is Part 21, Plumbers, Gas Fitters and Railways Act 2006. I was part of Government Administration Select Committee in first 2 terms, and it was very well chaired by Honourable Ruth Dyson, and she remembers that every term we had this Plumbers, Gas Fitters and Railways Act addressed with some manner. And this is again, this term I have become part of this select committee and very well chaired by our colleague, what's his name? Brett Hudson, exactly. Brett Hudson. And we are touching on this one where the Board of Drain Layers, Gas Fitters and Plumbers has got right to impose some fees for the people who are doing this work. When the ability to set a fees depends upon whether the notification is required under prescribed terms and conditions of licensee that authorize the supervision. This is being done so that some money can be generated for the board for the running, and that is going to help through this provision. The last part which I would like to touch, Mr. Chair, is the Policing Act 2008, which amends Clause 66, that Part 22 amends the Police Act 2008. The Clause 67 amends the Section 41, which relates to unclaimed property. I remember that this issue was raised some times ago, that there are a number of properties which are under the supervision of the police, which nobody claims and doesn't have any value, and that police can dispose of in the due course. So this part will be amending the Police Act, where in subsection 5 is replaced. The new subsection provides that the property that is of little or no monetary value may be given away as an alternative to being destroyed, and property that is not appropriate or practicable to sell may be destroyed or given away. So that will reduce the burden on the police to take care of the properties which are not sellable or does not have much value. Mr. Chair, these are some of the things which are being addressed into this, in this bill. We know that all the parties in the House they all are supporting, because these are non-contentious issues, and there are no opposition to this, and statutory bill I commend to the House.
Mr. Chair.
I call Andrew Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What a pleasure to be talking tonight